All right, let's dive into this uh, climate change deep dive. Seriously, you guys sent in a ton of articles, research, even some handwritten notes.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
That's why we're here, right?
Yeah,
To make sense of it all.
exactly.
Yeah.
We'll be looking at some, well, tricky questions, the latest in the world of climate politics, and even those arguments about whether natural cycles are really the main thing driving climate change.
Okay, so first things first. We hear climate change all the time, but like, what does it actually mean, practically speaking?
Well, it's not just, hotter summers. It's about these long-term shifts in temperatures and weather patterns. And the thing is, these changes are mainly driven by us, by what humans are doing, not just natural ups and downs.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. One of the things you guys sent in mentioned that carbon dioxide levels are the highest they've been in millions of years. It's got to be a bad sign, right?
Yeah, it's definitely something to be concerned about. You see, carbon dioxide, it's a greenhouse gas, and it's really important for regulating the Earth's temperature. When we release way too much CO2 into the atmosphere, mainly by burning fossil fuels, well, it messes up the natural balance.
So more CO2 basically means more heat trapped in the atmosphere. Got it. But how is this warming that we're causing different from, like, the natural temperature changes that have always happened?
Think of it like this. Earth's climate is like a dance, a really intricate dance with tons of different factors. You've got solar radiation from the sun, volcanic eruptions, even the way the Earth orbits the sun. All these things can cause natural shifts in temperature. But these changes usually happen super slowly, over thousands, even millions of years.
So the Earth's been doing the slow dance for a long time, and I guess ecosystems have had time to adjust to those gradual changes, right?
Exactly. But what's going on now is different. The rate at which we're putting CO2 into the atmosphere, it's like nothing we've ever seen before, something like 100 times faster than any natural warming period in Earth's history.
Wow, 100 times faster. No wonder things are feeling a bit out of whack. And it's already having a real impact, right? I mean, we see it all the time, melting glaciers, rising sea levels, crazy weather getting even crazier.
Right. Our planet has already warmed by about, 1.48 degrees Celsius since the late 1800s, and that's just the average. Some areas are warming way faster. The consequences are huge. Glaciers shrinking, hurricanes getting stronger, even plants and animals are being affected.
It's kind of like we've cranked up the thermostat for the whole planet, and now we're seeing the effects.
Yeah.
But one thing I hear a lot, especially from, well, let's say some of my more skeptical relatives, is that this is all natural, that it has nothing to do with humans.
It's a common thought. Natural climate variability definitely exists, but the key is to understand the scale and the speed of the change that's happening now.
So what makes what humans are doing the main driver this time?
Well, scientists have these incredibly sophisticated climate models, right? And these models take into account all the natural stuff we talked about, the sun, volcanoes, even Earth's orbit. But when they run these models using only natural factors, they can't replicate the warming trend we're actually seeing.
So something's missing, like a big piece of the puzzle.
Exactly. The only way to get a model that actually reflects what's happening in the real world is to include human activity, mainly burning fossil fuels and the increase in greenhouse gases that come with that. It's like all the pieces only fit together when we include human influence.
Okay, so we've established that what we're doing is the big factor behind this warming trend.
Yeah.
But where exactly are these emissions coming from? I guess heavily industrialized nations are the biggest culprits.
That's what you'd think, right? But the research you sent in, it points to some pretty surprising things. While industry is a big part of it, it's not just about countries anymore, it's about cities.
Cities? Really? How so?
The data shows that cities in Asia and the US are emitting the most greenhouse gases. And get this, Shanghai. It's currently the single biggest emitter globally.
Shanghai. I would have guessed it was somewhere in the US or Europe, a huge industrial hub. Why Shanghai?
Well, Shanghai's a global center for manufacturing and transportation, plus its population's growing like crazy. All of that leads to a massive concentration of emissions. It really shows how urbanization and industrialization are driving this whole climate crisis.
It's kind of wild to think that one city could outpace entire industrialized countries in terms of emissions.
Yeah, it's surprising. And this finding, it's causing a lot of debate at COP29, the UN climate change conference happening right now in Baku.
What are some of the main sticking points they're talking about?
There are a lot of discussions about setting stricter emission reduction targets and also about making sure that richer countries are giving enough financial support to help developing countries deal with the impacts of climate change.
So it's not just about cutting emissions. It's also about fairness and how we share the responsibility and the cost of dealing with this global problem.
Exactly. The political side of this is complicated, and things change all the time. One of your sources talked about Argentina possibly pulling out of the Paris Agreement, that big international agreement to limit global warming.
That sounds familiar. Didn't former U.S. President Trump pull the U.S. out of that agreement a while back? What happened then?
The U.S. withdrawal, even though it was reversed later, did have an impact. It caused a lot of uncertainty and probably slowed down progress on climate action.
It seems like politics can really mess with even the best global efforts. It's like two steps forward, one step back.
That's true. It shows how important it is to have international agreements, but also for action at every level, even individual efforts.
Speaking of taking action, you included a news story about Washington State. It seems like they're doing things differently, despite the uncertainty at the federal level in the U.S.
It's a really interesting example. Voters in Washington just supported a strong climate law that's aiming to cut their state's greenhouse gas emissions in half by 2030.
So even if things seem stalled at the federal level, there's still a lot happening on the ground, driven by people and local governments. It's good to remember that we don't have to wait for others to act.
Absolutely. Individual and local actions can really add up to make a big difference.
Okay, so we've got the basics of climate change down, the main things causing it, and the complicated world of climate politics. Now I'm wondering, what's in store for the future if we don't make any drastic changes?
Well, the projections from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, they're usually called the IPCC, they paint a pretty serious picture if we keep going the way we are.
Let's hear it. What are we looking at?
If we don't cut emissions in a big way, global temperatures could jump by, get this, between 2.1 and 5.7 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. And this isn't just about hotter summers, it's about a whole bunch of consequences that could change life as we know it.
So like coastal cities underwater, crops failing,
Yeah.
and extreme weather becoming even worse, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the people who are already most vulnerable would be hit the hardest. But it's not all bad news. The IPCC has also laid out what needs to happen to avoid the worst-case scenarios.
So there's still time to turn things around. What's the plan?
The science is clear on this. We need to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. To do that, we have to cut global emissions in half by 2030 and get to net zero emissions by 2050.
Okay, hold on. Net zero emissions, that means we're basically balancing out the greenhouse gases we release with the amount we remove, right?
Precisely. It means switching to clean energy sources, changing how we travel, making agriculture more sustainable, and even rethinking how much we consume. It's a huge task, but the IPCC believes we can do it.
And we'll be right back to dig into exactly what those changes could look like.
So before the break, we were talking about those goals the IPCC set, cutting global emissions in half by 2030 and reaching net zero by 2050. It sounds, I don't know, almost impossible, but there are some really promising solutions out there.
Yeah, it's easy to feel overwhelmed, like where do we even start? But I'm always interested in hearing about, the good stuff, the things that give us hope. What are some of the most promising things happening right now?
Well, one of the biggest areas is energy production, obviously. We need to move away from fossil fuels and embrace renewables, things like solar, wind, geothermal. And honestly, it's happening faster than you might think.
Yeah, I've seen a lot about solar and wind power becoming cheaper and more accessible. What about other innovations? Are there other cool things happening in the energy world?
Batteries, for one. Better battery tech is crucial for storing renewable energy, making it more reliable. So you can use it even when the sun's not out or the wind's not blowing. And then there's next-gen nuclear power, specifically these small modular reactors. They're designed to be safer and more efficient than traditional nuclear plants.
I read a bit about those. It seems like they address some of the safety and waste issues that have been a problem with nuclear in the past.
Right. And beyond energy production, we have to change how we get around our transportation systems. Electric vehicles are becoming more and more common, and there's more investment in public transportation, bike lanes, even designing cities so people can walk more.
It's about rethinking how we move people and stuff in a more sustainable way, basically.
Exactly. And we can't forget about nature itself. One of the reports you sent talked about natural climate solutions, things like protecting forests and wetlands, restoring coastal ecosystems.
Oh, right. They act like natural carbon sinks, right? Pulling CO2 out of the air and storing it.
That's it. Nature can be a huge help in fighting climate change. But it's not just about technology and policies. Individual actions matter a lot, too.
We talked about individual action before, but I think it's worth spending a bit more time on that. Like, what are some concrete things people can do in their daily lives that actually make a difference?
Well, it starts with thinking about how much we consume. Simple things like Using a reusable water bottle instead of buying plastic ones, walking or biking instead of driving when you can, even eating less meat. It all adds up.
One of your notes mentioned cutting back on meat. I've been trying to eat more plant-based meals, but I'm not going to lie, it's a challenge. Why is that such a big deal for the climate?
Animal agriculture is a big contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. Think about it. Deforestation to raise livestock, methane from cows. It all adds up. Eating less meat, even a little bit, can really help. It doesn't mean you have to go full vegetarian or vegan. It's more about balance and making conscious choices.
So it's about being aware of what we consume, everything from the food we eat to the energy we use. What about at home? Are there easy things we can do there that can actually make a difference?
Definitely. Switching to energy efficient light bulbs, unplugging electronics when you're not using them, even washing your clothes in cold water can lower your energy use. And over time, you'll save money on your energy bills too.
I've also been thinking about how we can, like, vote with our wallets, supporting companies that are trying to be sustainable, whether they're local businesses or bigger companies making changes to reduce their impact. That seems like a way to make a difference too, right?
You got it. Consumer demand is a big deal. When we choose to support businesses that are doing the right thing, we're showing them that sustainability is important to us. It's not just about buying stuff, it's about investing in companies that are working towards a better future.
That reminds me of something else, using our voices to push for change. What are some good ways to get our concerns out there and make sure people are taking action on a bigger scale?
There are tons of ways to get involved. It could be as simple as talking to your friends and family about climate change, just raising awareness and sharing info. Or you could join local groups, support organizations fighting climate change, or even contact your elected officials and tell them you want to see stronger climate policies.
It's easy to feel like your voice doesn't matter, but when we all speak up together, it can really make a difference.
Exactly. Change rarely comes from the top down. It usually starts with people speaking up, demanding action, and holding those in power accountable.
Okay, so we've got making changes in our daily lives, supporting the right businesses, speaking up for change, and remembering that even small actions can add up.
Yeah, and it's important to remember this isn't about feeling guilty or being perfect. It's about progress, trying our best, and understanding that every step we take towards a more sustainable future matters.
We've covered a lot of heavy stuff in this deep dive, but I'm actually feeling kind of optimistic. It's a huge challenge, obviously, but there are solutions. People are working on this, and we all have a part to play.
I feel the same way. We have the knowledge, the tools, and the power to tackle this. It won't be easy, but it's absolutely necessary. And in the end, it's about creating a world that's not just more sustainable, but also fairer for everyone.
Okay, so for everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into climate change. We hope you've learned something new, and more importantly, that you're feeling inspired to take action.
Yeah, and remember, what we do matters. What we say matters. Together, we can build a future where both people and the planet can thrive.
Welcome back. So we've talked about the science, we've looked at the big picture, and, well, frankly, it's a lot. But now, let's get down to brass tacks. What can we as individuals actually do to make a difference with this climate change thing?
I get it. It's easy to feel overwhelmed. But it's so important to remember that collective action, it starts with each of us. Every decision we make, every action we take, it all adds up.
It's that whole think globally, act locally thing. But what does that really look like in our everyday lives? Like the specific examples?
It can be super simple stuff like ditch the plastic water bottle and get a reusable one, or instead of jumping in the car, walk or bike to the store if it's close by. These little things, they might not seem like much on their own, but when a lot of people start doing them, it really does make a difference.
One of your notes mentioned eating less meat. I've been trying to do that. I have more plant-based meals, but, old habits die hard. What makes that so important to the climate anyway?
Well, animal agriculture, it's a big contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. Deforestation to create pasture land for livestock, the methane that cows release, it all adds up. So cutting back on meat, even a little bit, can really help. It doesn't mean you have to go vegetarian or vegan overnight. It's about finding what works for you and making those conscious choices.
Right, so it's about being more aware of what we eat, how much energy we use, all of that. What about around the house? Anything we can do there that can really make a difference?
Oh yeah, tons of things. Switching to LED light bulbs, they use way less energy. Unplug your electronics when you're not using them. Wash clothes in cold water. Easy stuff. And bonus, you'll save money on your energy bills in the long run.
I've also been thinking about, voting with our wallets, supporting companies that are actually trying to be sustainable, whether they're small local businesses or big companies making an effort to be more eco-friendly. That seems like another way to make an impact, right?
Absolutely. Consumer demand is a huge driver of change. When we support businesses that align with our values, we're sending a message that sustainability matters. And it's not just about buying things, it's about supporting companies that are working towards a better future with their practices.
Which leads me to another point, speaking up. How can we make our voices heard and push for change on a bigger scale?
There are so many ways to get involved. It can be as simple as talking to your friends and family about climate change, spreading the word. You can also join local groups, support organizations that are working on climate solutions, or even contact your elected officials and let them know you want stronger climate policies.
I think it's easy to feel like, oh, what difference can I make?
Hmm.
But when we all come together and speak up, it becomes something that can't be ignored.
Exactly. Real change rarely comes from the top. It starts with people speaking up, demanding action, and holding those in power accountable.
So we've talked about making changes in our daily lives, supporting the right businesses, using our voices to push for action, and realizing that every little thing we do adds up.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that this isn't about feeling guilty or being perfect. It's about progress, it's about effort, and it's about knowing that every step towards a more sustainable future counts.
We've covered some pretty heavy stuff in this deep dive, but honestly, I'm walking away with a sense of hope. It's a big challenge, no doubt, but there are solutions out there. People are working hard on this, and we all have a part to play in creating a better future.
I couldn't agree more. We've got the knowledge, the tools, and the power to make a real difference. It won't be easy, that's for sure, but it's so important. And at the end of the day, it's about building a world that's not just good for the planet, but also more fair for everyone.
So to everyone out there listening, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into climate change. We hope you learned something new, and more importantly, that you're feeling empowered to take action.
Remember, every single thing we do, it matters. Every voice makes a difference. Together, we can create a future where both humanity and our planet can thrive.